Thank you, Rudy. My name is Jim Novack of Talent Swarm. I'm going to focus more on the security issues, so it's really appropriate that Rudy covered very well all of the safety issues having to do with augmented reality. Talent Swarm is one of the founding members of the Augmented Reality for Enterprise Alliance, and we're all at the nascent point of an industry here, and we have an extra responsibility to think well and hard about what we do now so that our industry gets off to a good start. And I think that safety obviously is very important, but there's a perception also of security and privacy, which I'm going to go over. And this is mostly food for thought. I do have some technical solutions, which I suggest, but of course, these are all just proposals. Obviously, we're talking about enterprise, not consumer products, because I feel that this is a picture of my iPhone. Who has the time, the interest, the knowledge to really establish correctly the settings, the security settings of your phone? You know, who manages the security settings of their phone? I know okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. The point is that enterprise applications will have to probably work in a different world than consumer devices. We talk about consumer devices or consumer services like Airbnb. Even Airbnb is talking about verified IDs. So security is becoming part of the necessary thought that companies must put into their products or services. Of course, security has been on our minds since the beginning of time. And the very first thing we talk about security is perimeter defense. So if we're talking about augmented reality applications, we would probably first talk about avoiding that somebody would access the device, the glass, the tablet, whatever it may be that you are hosting your application or service on. But even perimeter defense, like the Playboy Mansion, had its secret tunnels to get in. So, of course, many developers put in back channels, put in ways to get in the back. Then, of course, besides perimeter defense or protecting the security of access, we talk about identification of the person. And if this is obvious that now in Europe we have digital ID cards. Probably even with biometric devices, still are subject to identity theft. And then we have the typical problem of tailgating in many facilities where the biometric card is completely useless if somebody follows you into a room. And of course, we have what I would call the Trojan horse application, which it's historic. And it still goes on today where you enter being something else. And of course, this comes from the human virus, which comes into the human cell appearing to be something else. So all of these are very basic security. I mean, this is security 101. So we then have the shape-shifting, which is somebody that comes into an environment and then turns into something else. So we mostly think about the solution of security being a biometric solution. That is with eyes or fingerprints or voice prints. But even those, we know, are subject to other solutions to get around those. Here we have Tom Cruise in Minority Report after having changed his eyes. So I offer the opportunity to think about what would be the augmented reality industry's 3 laws. And the beauty of Asimov's 3 laws of robotics is that with very few words, we essentially cover almost all the possible situations. Of course, movies are made about the exceptions to these rules. But this is a very good way to start thinking. If we consider government or government laws, the laws should be simple, few, and unchanging. And I think this is a good example. So as a thought experiment in the 15 minutes that I have, I'd like to propose to you that we go through and attempt to do this for AR. We have essentially in AR what would be telepresence devices. Here are some. Telepresence could be also a robonaut like this, where somebody is operating remotely. Of course, we have telepresence as in the council room and in the Jedi, the Jedis here conversing. The question is, we have to make sure that this person that is supposedly conversing with us remotely is really who they say they are. We have augmented reality devices. Here are some that are at the show, DAQRI and ODG. And then we have virtual reality applications, where we have a completely artificial environment. I'm saying telepresence, augmented reality, and virtual reality so that we have a full scope of, although there obviously are hybrid applications that combine these three, but let's say these are the three environments that we're talking about. Our own contribution to the show, we're here as IB Talent Swarm. We have a collaborative work environment. Our specialty is oil and gas and petrochemical, energy, and nuclear power. So our clients ask us to provide them with, yes? Oh, okay. Thought I was getting pulled off the stage here. Sorry. I didn't know NSA was on to me. So what we have, the very first question that our clients ask us is, oh, what about the security? Because if I'm dealing with an oil and gas refinery and I have somebody that gets onto that facility, even a virtual way, they can do a lot of damage. So back to the three laws. How do we apply this to augmented reality? Of course, we authenticate documents, data, protect files, protect users, eliminate fraud. We're talking about very standard issues regarding enterprise AR safety. Spam, identity, all these things are pretty standard, and they would work from the standard security applications that companies are working on. But going back to data security, we have confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Availability might be a little confusing, but it's essentially a lot of you that have these horrible dongles that you have to access to be able to do your VPNs, and you're sitting waiting 5 or 10 minutes for the thing to clear you onto your corporate VPN. If something is too hard to use, it's not going to be a good solution. So here's a modest proposal for what we would consider sort of the 7 levels of what could be an AR proposal. And we would start very basic from an ID assigned to the device. I mean, there should not be a single AR or VR device that doesn't have an ID code. I mean, it makes sense. We do that with phones. And that has saved, for security purposes, many problems. Then we have to communicate over a trusted network. That is, that whatever we're talking or sending through the cables or through the ether, that it must get to the other side as it was intended. Moving up sort of the level of sophistication, we talk about to verify if you have a SME, an expert that is working with a technician, we have to make sure that that expert is who he says he is or she is and is talking to the right person. So we're moving up this level. Then number 4, it's not the same to get a recommendation of a restaurant from the restaurant as it is from 1,000 users that have tested that restaurant. So we're moving up higher levels of abstraction. And I think this is very important for us in this world that we're going into, that we have so much data. When we're looking at an augmented reality view of a street and we have a lot of restaurants to choose from, we need to know who's providing that information. Obviously, 5 is a little bit more sophisticated. If I'm doing an AR function and I decide to do something wrong halfway through it, my system should be smart enough to know that I've gone off the deep end. And then we talk about respecting privacy. And I would say 7th level would be do no harm. I mean, that we as an industry should avoid doing bad things with AR because that will just hurt us all. I'm talking about the first few levels, and there's a company that we work with called Augmented. They're from Spain, and they provide a very usable system that seeds keys so that even a nuclear power company could have their own internally generated keys to provide security in terms of identity and transmission. This talks about the fact that the identity keys, the keys that provide the security are not mixed with the data flow. So after the presentation, if any of you have questions about this, actually the person that provides this service is here, so you can go into details. But again, I was talking about if you get this augmented reality screen, you would need to know where this information is coming from and what the validity or reference to you. I mean, how much do I actually trust these various sources of information? And then the activity auditing is more sophisticated. If I sell a solution to a nuclear power plant and somebody basically goes into that plant under a guise of good activity and then halfway through turns into something else, my system should be smart enough to be able to detect that. And that's what I call activity auditing. Obviously, the more we audit, the more complexity we add to the problem, the higher the costs. But we're talking about here even quite sophisticated functions in terms of privacy. These are 2 examples of what could be done for augmented reality, that if you don't want somebody with glasses to come into your facility and be able to scrape all the information off your whiteboards, there should start to be some standards emerging along these lines. And the one on the right would be, for example, if I would take a generic gesture, which would be like this, that AR cameras should be able to know that I don't want that AR camera to be recording me or recording what's behind me. So I'm inviting you to start thinking of higher function privacy issues that the consumers or the enterprise users are going to demand. This is just for fun. We take privacy for granted in this generation, but soon it will be a precious commodity. We have examples of bad uses of technology, like the one on the upper right. This has actually been removed from service. The company that put out these millimeter wave scanners in the airports, they have removed them, and that company has had to take those machines back. So not paying attention to these issues can have dire consequences in terms of business. We're talking, on the bottom we see that different age groups have different privacy levels in terms of their concern about it. And again, just to finish, that it's great. We're an industry that's booming. We expect that in the next couple of days we'll all see wonderful applications of these new technologies. But it makes you think when Google has, for some reason, delayed the entrance of their Google Glass, it must be that they know something, that maybe the public is very, very sensitive to having people wearing these devices. And these are issues that I invite you all to, as industry leaders, industry makers, programmers, developers, to start thinking about how you can integrate these issues into your products. And please come and see me at booth number 84. We have a immersive demo which allows you to, either on a full screen or with an Oculus Rift, to collaborate with other engineers in a petrochemical environment. So come and try that out. Thank you very much for your attention.